Hey everybody, welcome to Houdini Hangout. It is June. We're here at the beginning of June, and just hopefully starting off the month with some interesting stuff here. Glad to have you joining us tonight for the stream. I live in the Northeast, and if you have noticed anything on, the internet, everything's real smoky. So yesterday was like the smokiest day I've ever seen. I mean, we don't normally have like wildfires or anything like that up where I'm from. And, but it was pretty crazy. The sky was orange. It was very weird. So it's been, I feel like, we're getting a little taste of what, those folks out West get all the time. So, it's kind of been it was a crazy couple days. Hopefully that's starting to calm down a little bit, but it's also cloudy here where I live all the time, so it's pretty normal to it's kind of hard to tell if it's still smoky or not out there, but inside trying not to breathe the outside air, which I don't know how you do. I don't know how you section off the outside. Guess you need like a hermetically sealed house or something like that. But anyways, so yeah, that's been fun. It's been interesting to have all of that craziness going on right now. But anyways, kind of interesting little stuff going on there. But to Houdini specifically, we're talking about Vellum tonight again, and we are talking about hair this time. And for some reason, every time I start to play around with hair or do anything that's hair-like, because you don't have to specifically do hair, but we're going to mainly be looking at, conceptually what hair typically does, but whenever I start messing around with a simulation for Vellum hair, I tend to like hit this brick wall at the beginning where I'm like, shoot, how do I set this stuff up? Like even still, like when I'm just going through to just like kind of walk through my brain what I'm going to show more or less for something like this, I still was like, I felt like I was like a crazy person and couldn't figure it out for some reason. I don't know if it's just because I've never done like character work or I've never done any like, grooming and things like that, but it just always feels like there's something in my brain that has to click into place. So hopefully this will help you click that thing into your place, into place in your brain. If you're watching this, that's kind of the hope here. That we'll be able to do something that will kind of jog your memory, help you to, remember these things maybe a little bit better. But, so hair is the topic tonight. We're going to do a couple different setups. We're going to revisit something I did the first week that we were looking at hair. We're going to revisit that, and then we'll kind of go from there and try to make sense a little bit more of what how to kind of make some of these different setups and do them in whatever various ways might be needed, whether you're doing something that's simply reacting to hair, like, on a grid, or maybe it's a character that's moving and you want the hair to move based on how the character's moving. We're actually going to play a little bit with some of the hair tools. Now, I'm not a grooming artist. I have no expertise in that field at all, but it's fun. We'll play around with it a little bit, see what we can get going, and kind of go from there. So the last thing I'll say before we dive in and do some Houdini stuff properly, if you have any comments, if you have any questions, if you have any thoughts of any type, please feel free to put them in the chat. I am certainly not an expert in every, sense of the word. I know Houdini and I feel comfortable using it, but I certainly am not. Oh, hey, Zach, how's it going, man? Hello, welcome. I am certainly not the definitive expert in this field, and I'd love to hear any comments or thoughts that you guys might have. Always open to hear, hey, you should have done it this way better, or whatever. Whatever your thoughts might be on the topic that we're tackling, always open for comments, and ideas of how to do it better, or just, questions on why I did something that way. If you have the question, probably somebody else has the question, so you might as well ask it. So hair, let's get going, and we'll do some kind of a simple setup, and then we'll do something a little bit more complicated and go from there. So yeah, let's dive in. All right, so you know what? I'm kind of in this other view. I'm going to change it here. Hopefully, yeah, we'll do that one. I feel like this is a little nicer. I don't know. You can always let me know if there's a view that you like better or worse, whatever. So I'll do something like this. There we go. Should be good. Okay, cool. So the first thing I want to do is just tackle the most basic possible setup, which is just obviously a single hair. We talked about this before, but it'll be a little bit of review for you, and then we'll go from there and talk about more complicated setups. All right, let's do a geo node. We'll just say single hair. Let's jump in here. We'll grab a line, and let me turn this on as well. There we go. That way you can see more of what I'm doing. All right, so we've got a line here, and it's only got 2 points. Let's do something like, I don't know, 8. Do 8 points here. So let's first, I'm not going to do anything too overly ambitious with this. We're just going to do a Vellum hair, Vellum configure hair, drop this down. So let's just pin this root point down here, first of all. So we'll use this selection. We'll grab this point. We'll hit enter. Point 0 is going to be constrained in space. So that's good. We've got that. And let's just kind of look at what's going on here again, just to kind of refresh our minds. Just call this, initialize hair, something like that. We'll look at our constraint geometry. So we've got these all being created from the initialize hair node. There's a bunch of, primitives that are being created here. We can see that there's, looks like there's 7 of each of these, if I'm counting that right. And so the top bunch are all stretch shear. So that's going to make sure that they kind of stay, within a certain distance of each other. It's going to allow them to have a little bit of stretchiness, but nothing too crazy. And then we've got these bend twist. So that's obviously going to make sure that it bends, in a certain way with a certain stiffness, and, keeps its, it keeps its orientation more or less. So if we do this and then do a Vellum solver, drop that down. This is obviously the most basic option here. Let's just do this. We don't need a ground position because we want it to kind of fall down. We'll just leave it at 1 substep for right now and let it go. And we got nothing here because, yeah, it's like sitting on top of itself. So let's actually change that a little bit. We'll get a little bit of a better result here. Let's just do this in the X direction, because when it's sticking straight up and down, it's like they're all kind of balancing on top of each other, right? So it's going to try to kind of keep itself, in one spot, and then it falls over. So let's do it like this, and this will feel a little bit better. There we go. So we have our hair constraint here. Now, just remember that we have the option to have this orientation of this joint restricted, basically. And that is done right here with our orientation pin type. We can say none, and this should swing around and fall straight down. So that's good. We've got no orientation pin, or we could do same as position, or a soft orientation pin, which looks like it's actually not going to be very stiff. So same as position is going to make a permanent orientation pin. So this is going to try to keep, it's going to try to keep the root, like this pinned point, kind of sticking in the same direction that we had it initially. So if we did something instead that was, let's just say, a little bit up like this, right? So a little bit in that direction, and we simmed this now. It's going to try to keep it staying up in that kind of upwards forward direction. So this obviously is going to be really important when it comes to working with things like the actual hair on the head of a character or whatever, because you don't want the roots to lie completely flat. Our hair doesn't do that. There's some stiffness there. So kind of the longer it gets, the more loose it's going to get, right? So important thing to keep in mind there is just that we want to make sure that it's not too overly stiff, or that it's can kind of have some stiffness at its root, and we can kind of control it from there. That way we don't have this flopping around root that never stays kind of pinned in a position. So so super simple. We talked about this a bit before. We went over the constraints and things like that, and I believe the one thing that's kind of doing a lot of the heavy lifting here is that it actually takes the inertia and the mass to 0 in this case. So in this case, it does not have any inertia or any mass for the root point here. Now, I don't remember if nope, that won't change it at all, the matched animation. But so that is kind of the trick that's holding that in place. It's on the Vellum geometry. So our stream right here has an inertia and a mass of 0. And so that is what's really driving this point to be pinned in position. Because if we look again at our constraint geometry here, at this initialize hair, we go to the primitive, there's not really anything that's pinning that in place, right? There's no pin constraints or anything like that in this list. There's no point attribute here in the constraint geometry that's defining that either. So just a good thing to keep in mind that is how that kind of point is pinned. So we have that. Let's play around a little bit with our stiffness here, right? Because this bend stiffness is what's really going to be mostly what we deal with here, because we don't really want our hair to be stretching. Hair isn't particularly stretchy. So it's kind of nice to just keep that as is, as just permanently kind of as stiff as possible. But it is bendy, right? It's able to bend. So let's just up this by a factor of 10 and continue along and see how this goes. So this should have quite a bit more stiffness. And sure enough, we've got some springy stiffness going on there. All is good. Cool. So we could go another 10. I have a feeling this is going to be a bit too stiff, but we'll kind of go there. No, that's not too bad. So we'd probably be somewhere in the middle there. You could half this just by changing that first part to be half that. And then sure enough, we've got some hair that's doing something interesting, right? So, all right, we've got one hair going on here. This obviously is very basic. There's nothing too exciting going on here. Let's start moving a little bit further and actually doing something a bit more interesting with our geometry. So I'm going to jump up, and instead of doing a single hair, let's add a new geometry node. And we're just going to say maybe hair grid or something like that, right? So there we go. We've got our hair grid. And I'm just going to turn this hide on. So let's get both of these things. Let's grab a line, right? So we're going to use that again. Maybe we'll do 9 points this time just for kicks. And let's grab a grid, right? I think you know what kind of plan we're going to go on here. We're going to take this grid. Might be a little big. Let's reduce that in size. Maybe we'll do it like that. I don't know. Somewhere in that range is good. Let's do a scatter on this grid. And then we will do a copy to points. And this will copy our line geometry to all of these scattered points now. So we've got quite a few there. Actually, you know what? I could probably make that grid a little bigger. So let's do that. We'll just do it to maybe 5 by 5. Cool. All right. So now we've got our hair kind of in this grid pattern here, just randomly set. And if we take, let's take our Vellum hair, and we'll grab that. So that's going to start creating our attributes for us, our hair attributes, things like mass and drag and orientation, things like that. It's going to start setting those things up for us. So that's all well and good. And let's grab a Vellum solver here. We're going to use a ground position. So we'll use that. And let's check this out. Let's hit play and see what goes on here. Okay, interesting. They all kind of sit for a second, and then once these collisions start happening, they all fall down. So we don't have a very robust simulation yet. One thing you're probably thinking is, hey, we should probably pin these points. It's kind of funny looking. We need to pin these points right to this ground plane so that they're not going to move around, right? Because if they move around, if it gets jostled around, they're not going to sit. Their roots aren't going to sit, right? You watch some of these and they kind of bounce around and do their thing, right? So obviously we're missing that one very important step here. So let's do that. And what we can do is we can set our group at this point here. And if we use a group expression, there's a nice handy little built-in expression that we can use. So what we can do is we can go over here to our expression. I have some qlib ones, but we could do curve start point, but there should be first point of primitive. So if we click on that and just view this and change this over to points, sure enough, we have our vertex prim index 0. And there we go. If it's equal to 0, that is going to be in the group. And sure enough, if we look at our points, number 0 is in our group. And so therefore, if we copy our points here, we should still have that group. Let me just check. I'll middle click here. We have 1,000 in that group. I'm going to rename that a little bit. We can just call this something like roots. And then if we look here again, we have roots, we have 1,000, and we had 1,000 scattered primitives. So that's all great. So we've got our roots now that we can pin. So let's do that. Let's take our hair, let's take our pinpoint, let's do roots, and let's see what happens here. We should be back to kind of where we started with the last one. So let's take a look at this and see what's going on. So it takes a second for these things to kind of fall and do their thing, but we should keep the roots generally in place, right? So now we can see that all of these roots are staying locked in position, right? So that's good. So we've achieved one part of our effort here. Let's do something maybe a little bit more interesting. Let's do maybe some wind or something like that. That could be cool. So let's do a pop wind. Cool. And this is a super common setup. This isn't anything, groundbreaking or anything you've probably never seen before, but, just something to think about what's going on here, right? So we've got, let's see, we have a little bit of wind in there. Oh, that's interesting. Why did that not, did I miss something? Oh, I didn't turn the amplitude up. All right, so let's get some wind velocity here in the X, maybe, 2, and we'll do like a half for the amplitude on the noise. And let's just see where that gets us. Oh, way too much. Way too much. Or actually, you know what? It probably is more so that it's just falling over because it's not sturdy enough. So, all right. They're falling over. They're getting some noise, but we want to have them a bit stiffer. So let's do that. Let's turn this length down. I'm going to change my timeline to 120 so we don't have quite as long here. And let's do the same thing we did before. Let's change this maybe to, 0.1. Sorry, 0.01. And see where that goes. And now, we're getting a little somewhere. A little more interesting. Not quite there. Let's double that. See where that gets us. Okay. Interesting. So we can just kind of keep tweaking this until we get something that's working the way we want it to. And there we go. We're starting to get something maybe that's a little bit more interesting. Some grass blowing in the wind, whatnot. Turn the real time on here. You can see we've got, got a decent amount of control going on here. And I'm also going to come in here and turn the air resistance down a little bit. Maybe we'll turn that to half. It's not really going to push it quite as much, so that'll be good too. I just don't want it to be totally like being grabbed by the wind and kind of forced to do whatever. I want it to have a little bit less control over the whole simulation. So, all right, we've got some wind blowing through our grass here. So that's kind of interesting. Again, this could be hair, this could be grass, it could be seaweed, it could be whatever you think. It could be some sort of random, geometric thing, right? That you might want to do. So the other really important thing in any hair simulation, right, is going to be the thickness, right? Because when you've just one hair, you're not really thinking too much about how thick, where your collisions are happening, right? Because it doesn't really matter. It's just one hair. It's just one line. If it's a string, whatever, there's not really going to be a lot going on there. However, if we have something like this, we want to see where our, geometry is going to be, what the thickness of it's going to be. So we visualize our thickness. Now we can start to see that, okay, that's about how much, room around each of these primitives we're going to kind of give as a collision distance. So if we up this to, 0.5 or something like that, they're going to be quite a bit more thick. So if we watch this, we should hopefully be able to see that there's a little bit more thickness here. Might be hard to tell because we've got our geometry kind of all, right up against each other. Let's do something like a sweep, maybe. Maybe we could do that. Take a look at what this looks like. And we're just going to do a round tube here. And let me just make sure we have an output here that's actually doing a p-scale. Yes, it is. And if we change this to 1, that should be our p-scale now. Yep, that looks right. That versus that. And if we wireframe it, we can see that sure enough, those are all tied to the same, basically the p-scale is the multiplier of that. So that's working great. All right, so let's see if we can get a decent playback on this just to see what's going on here. And there we go. It's got some weirdness at the end, but that's okay. We're not really going for anything too advanced here. Yeah, so it looks like we're getting what we would expect more or less. We're getting some collisions and things like that. Let's up the thickness on this a little bit. Let's do, will that actually work? Let me see. Might be too thick. I just want to make sure it's not sitting right. Yeah, it's like almost right on top of each other. So you got to make sure that obviously these aren't colliding with each other by default, because that's not going to work. So let's see here if we see any more collision, and sure enough, yeah, it looks like we're seeing quite a bit more of them kind of laying on top of each other and that type of a thing. Obviously, we've got a little bit of jumping at the top. I believe that's because of the orientation attribute is a little funky up there. I'm not sure if that's getting recalculated properly, or it might just, it just might be acting a little weird. You might want to do something like an orient, a long curve in between here. See if that helps. It might help, it might not. Actually, not really sure here. Yeah, there we go. So the orient along curve is just basically making sure that the orientation attribute is being written properly, and that's fixing that weird jumping at the end, basically. So we've got this whole thing going on here. It's looking kind of interesting, right? So that's all working well. And I think if you have been following along with this, you could probably guess what we might do here. We're going to throw some collision geometry in here just to make something a little bit interesting. We'll just do let's do a torus. Just do a torus here. We're going to put it into this collision geometry input, and I'm going to do a transform, and we're just going to animate this along and see exactly what's going on here. All right, so just want to see where our simulation is here. Cool. All right, we'll do that. And then the last one, maybe at 96. Turn the sim off, actually. At 96, we'll have it be, we'll have it be over there. Cool. All right. So let's check our solver here. And I'm going to uncheck that, turn our sim back on, and let it play through. So, I mean, nothing groundbreaking is going to happen here. We're going to have some collisions, have it kind of push through this, and then there we go. Oh, you know what? I actually want to probably lift that up a little bit. Let's do that. Cool. Which just has a little bit more ability to collide with those. Wasn't affecting it quite as much because I think it was mainly only colliding with the very bottom point, which actually is the orientation of that is constrained. So because of that, it's not going to, it's going to not be able to bend really that much in that orientation. So, all right. So let's just take one last little look inside of this here and see if we can't just make sure that we understand exactly what's going on with our constraints that we're feeding in to this simulation here. So, okay, we have, let's see here. I'm just going to say visualize here, although we know kind of what's going on there already. So this is our Vellum geometry. We've got some drag set, inertia, and mass set. You can see that every so often there's one that's set to 0, and that is going to be the ones that are pinned to the grid in this case, or just the 0 kind of root point of each of those curves. And we have an orient attribute that's been created here. I believe that is from this checkbox here, although it seems like it's calculating an orientation anyways, which it might be doing up here. Nope, that's weird. I actually thought it was this. So that's interesting, but it is still calculating an orientation there. So, all right, we've got our p-scale set from our edge length scale, so that's good. And everything else is zeroed because we don't have any velocity on it, and we don't have any angular velocity either. And you can see here the roots group that we had made. So that's just our Vellum geometry, so pretty straightforward. And then if we look at our constraints geometry, it's the same type of thing, right? We've got some damping ratio. Okay, so Zach is just asking if the grid of the points are scattered on, had an animation in its translation, like if it jiggled around, would the root still have an inertia of 0? That's a great question, actually. We're going to touch on that in a second. I'm going to do some, like, a little bit more of like a true like hair type sim, like where we're going to have like the hair coming off of a geometry and kind of animate it around so that we get some more interesting movement with it, where it's not just the wind that's kind of driving it, but the geometry underneath it. So we're going to do that in a second. And I'm actually not sure the answer of that. So we'll see when we do that. I think it should still be set that way. But yeah, I think it'll still be set that way. So when we do the match animation here, what we want that to actually do is have the skin and the guides be animated, right? So the only ones that will be pinned to that animation will be the roots, right? But we will actually have the hair or whatever it is, moving around, kind of attached to the geometry. So in this case, this setup wouldn't be super great for that, because I believe if we were moving this around, oh no, actually it does keep its, yeah, we could actually maybe try that real quick then. I was thinking that this was going to rescatter if I translated this, but actually it doesn't seem like that's going to happen. So that's cool. Yeah, so it actually matters more about these points moving. So if I do a transform here, and let me just do this in the X, I'll just right click and get the, we'll just do a wave, and I'll do a period of, I don't know, 3 maybe? No, that might, yeah, let's try 3. So I'm just going to add a wave chop basically to it. And that's just going to move these points back and forth, right? Like that. Are they rescattering? I don't think so, right? No. Yeah, how could they rescatter? They're after that. Okay, so that should move these, which in turn will move these, right? And then if we match animation here, and check that, let me check the Vellum, points, Vellum geometry, inertia is still 0. Yep, that looks right. So let me check this out here. So now if we look at it here, we should have, still moving around kind of the way we'd expect it, but we still have 0 in the inertia. And let's actually check the simulation here. We can actually look in here. So let's look at, and here you can see the inertia and mass for, say, 0.0 is 0, 0 still. So yeah, if it is jiggling around, it will still have an inertia of 0 and a mass of 0. And that's actually what's keeping it pinned in place. Now, if we changed that, let me see here. If we changed that to stopped, I'm curious if that still has the same one. That's actually just not 100% sure on that case. Okay. So stopped is going to be a little bit different, and this is going to have a glue to animation. So let's take a look at this, how this is going to differ for us here. Yeah, so stopped is a little different. It still does have actual inertia and things like that, but it doesn't really give you any different of a result. What it does is it adds the attribute here that says glue to animation. And so we do have an inertia and a mass. They are a little less, but that's because I think it's the root and it's, shorter or whatever. But so those attributes, the glue to animation is now going to be what actually drives it. So it adds that in and sets the mass and inertia back kind of to what it should be. And then if we did a soft, that one's going to be a little bit different as well, because that is going to, instead of doing it that way, I believe that's going to make a new constraint. Sorry, let me just look here. Yep, pin orient. There it is. So this, if we do a soft one, it's going to have a pin orient constraint. So this is actually adding, 1,000 hair constraints in here that are these pin orient constraints. And those, it should, I think, almost still be exactly the same. Let me just double check here. Don't think we're going to see much different here. Now that does give it the option to move a little bit. And the stiffness of that is set by, let me look. Where's the stiffness? Sorry, I lost it. Here we go. All right, so the stiffness of these pin orient, 0.3. So that is set by the bend stiffness. So that would be the way if you wanted to have a soft constraint for the pin, you could set it that way, and it would basically bend the same way all the way to the root. It'd have the same bend strength all the way to the root. And I think we looked at that a little bit earlier, but those are kind of the three different options that you could have for pinning those points to, animated geometry or whatever. So hopefully that makes sense. Hopefully that kind of gives a better sense of what's going on there, right? So I think it kind of depends on what your scenario is. That if you want there to be some flexibility on that very the root point, then you would do something like a soft. The only bad thing there is that that might be too bendy for you at that point. You might want it to be relatively stiff at that point and more bendy or higher. So let's just take a look at that. Let's look at what we might do there, right? In a case like that. So let's just put this stiffness back to 1 here. So this is going to be pretty flexible, actually. Let's just take a look at this here. So these are going to be pretty flexible. In fact, I want it to be a little less than that. So let's do it maybe 0.01, something like that. Nah, it's a little too much. That looks funky. No, that's too much. Let's do 0.01, and maybe it was like 0.5 was where we had it. I'm just trying to remember exactly where we had this, where it was like falling over a bit, but not totally. Okay. So there we go. So say we wanted it to be really loose, but we didn't want this like root to be that loose, right? So what we could do is we could take these pin orient constraints, right, that are coming out of this hair, right? So we've got these pin orient, and we could do something like an adjust float in this case. And since that is on the constraint geometry, we're going to take this middle one right here and drag it over there. And what we can do is we can set, we're going to set stiffness. That's what we want to do. So we're going to do stiffness. And so right now that's going to set all of the stiffnesses to, no, we're adding 0. So we're going to set always. And that should set our stiffnesses to 0, but it's not because we're in point. So I'm going to change that to primitive. There we go. So now our stiffnesses are all 0. And what we could do instead is grab a group and say at type equals, and that one was called, I think, pin orient. Yep. Right, like that. Yeah, no problem, Zach. I'm glad to come to go through this stuff. That's why we're here. We're here to learn, right? Me too. I enjoy learning these things as well. So, okay, so now we have this set to type pin orient. So we've got our type set. So if we scroll up here, we should see that our stiffnesses, are now actually something. And that's right, there is actually a pin and a pin orient, but I think the pin orient is what we want to work with here, because the pin is actually the stiffness of it locationally, like if it could move away from this. So the pin is actually keeping it locked in 3D space, and then the orientation is how much it can kind of bend around from there. So let's set this to be, I don't know, 0.01. What was it before? Sorry, I'm just, okay, 0.05. All right, so let's do something like this. We'll give it 10 times as much there. So now when we look at this, we should see that the root pin here is going to stay a bit more stiff, which it is, and the top ones are all just going to float around, right? So now we can see that, sure enough, this root of our hair here is actually stiff now, and the rest of them are flopping around. So that's, there's different ways to be able to kind of tweak these and work with these attributes. And I think the thing that hopefully you've gotten a sense for now is that you don't have to worry too much about playing around with some of these attributes ahead of time, like before they go into the solver. You can just get in there and tweak them and mess with them. Like, it's not going to break anything. It's not going to do anything too crazy. And it allows you to have that control that you might want for your points, in your before they go into your simulation. So we have now, hopefully we're starting to kind of put some of these pieces together, right? We can actually go in and tweak how these orientations are pinned. And similarly, if we wanted to give the positional stiffness, wanted to set that way down, we could. And we could do that instead. So instead of pin orient, we could just say pin. And in this case, we probably want it to be like, I don't know, maybe 1,000, maybe 100, something like that, because we want it to be sort of stiff, but not completely stiff. And so now these things should actually, okay, that's interesting. Don't know what that was. Huh. That is very interesting. Current state doesn't have handles. Cool. That's awesome. Anyways, not sure what that was all about. So now the question is, we should be having these kind of move around a little bit. So let's see. Yep. I think they will. Let me turn on some visualizers here. Yeah, I think it's this pin to target. So let's see here. Let me turn that down just a little bit. Set it something like this to 1 maybe. See if those get moved around a little bit here now. Seem like they're moving a little bit, but not completely. It's interesting. Actually thought that would be a little more easy. Hadn't played with this yet. So, am I missing something here? Let's see, match animation. No, that's right. It should match the animation. Interesting. I thought that would work, but it doesn't seem to be working. So that's okay. Probably if I wanted to do that anyways, I would do something that would be like an attached to geometry, or like a glue type constraint or something like that. That would be flexible, or not a glue constraint. I think it would be an attached to geometry. But anyways, I would do a different constraint that would allow me to have some flexibility. So I thought that would work, but anyways, it didn't. So let's get rid of that for right now, because we had these set decently. Let's do the stiffness at I think we had this at 3, I think. Yeah, something like that. Cool. And I'm going to turn off these visualizers. Don't need to have that on. So, okay. So we've got an object that's kind of colliding with this simulation. And we could obviously sweep this in the end. We're going to get these things back. And if we take this, merge them together. There we go. We've got, I don't know, an anemone, I guess. I guess it's some sort of an enemy. Anemone. Ugh. Mouthful. So yeah, we've got something interesting going on here, more or less. So we have some collisions. We've got our stiffness and our bend stiffness, our stretch stiffness. All of those things have been set in this sim here, and hopefully this isn't anything new or groundbreaking from a Vellum standpoint. This is all very standard kind of setup for these Vellum things that we've kind of worked through, whether it's cloth or soft bodies, things like that. This is all very kind of standard. So let's now take this and move it into more of a like the character world, or something that would maybe fur or hair or something like that. So let's kind of take this to the next step and kind of play around with something that would be a little bit more practical and maybe more photorealistic, or a character-based workflow. So let's do that. We're not going to do anything with a character for sure, but let's play around with that. All right, so I'm going to turn those off, and let's do a geometry again, and we'll say here, groom and sim. And so this is going to be kind of the one that moves the most away from what we've been doing before. These kind of just really contained within the Vellum kind of tool set of HDAs that have been created there for the Vellum solver. We're going to be kind of using some grooming tools in this, and I'll talk about those as we go through, like kind of conceptually what they're doing. Again, I'm not a groom expert, but I think this will at least be interesting to take a look at on some level. So let's we'll just do a sphere to start with. That should be fine. Something very basic. Let's do a polygon. Let's do, I don't know, 6 will probably be good. All right, cool. So we've got this sphere here, right? And let's first do a transform on this. We're going to do something really similar to what I just did. Let's grab a wave here, maybe a period of 2.5, something like that. And I'm going to jump back up and just grab another one here. We're going to rotate it on the y-axis. Let me view that. We're going to rotate this on the y-axis so it kind of spins back and forth. So let's do another wave here. And the period of that could be, I don't know, maybe we'll do it a little bit differently. Maybe that's like 3.5. And we want the amplitude to be, I think 90 will be good, because that'll be a 90-degree turn back and forth. So let's do that. All right, so now we should have a sphere that's going like this. Yep, it's moving around, doing its thing, right? So that's kind of interesting. We can always play around with these attributes and values, but there we go. All right, so what we're going to do is do a hair generate from here. So we're going to use this hair generate node. And so what this looks for, it can look for a few different things. It's going to look for arrest skin or points. It's going to look for guides, and it's going to look for animated skin or points. Now, we could do a few different things here, right? It's asking for points. So I believe if we did a scatter here, I actually didn't play with this before, but I believe if we did a scatter and drop this in here, it should generate an unchecked use guides. Nope, it doesn't. Okay. Oh, right. Mode per point. Nope. Unless I'm missing something. No. Okay. So that does not work. That's okay. So what we actually want is scatter onto surface. Although we've got a little error here, and I'm going to try to... Oh, I hate that. I'm just going to make a new one. I hate when it does that. get a little error, and sometimes you can get in there and kind of make them go away. But okay, so by default, you just plug in geometry into this first rest skin input. You're going to get a bunch of hair, right? Hair guides, basically, in this case. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to uncheck use guides because we're not using this guide input because we want to just grow hair onto this object, right? And the really nice thing about this is that this has a lot of kind of built-in stuff that you would need to do that would be a little bit more complicated to do, right? You could actually do this with the grid as well, right? You could take your grid and just stick it in here and it's going to do the exact same thing kind of that we did before, right? So this is actually kind of a really nice kind of tool to be able to do this. So like we could do something like, 1 meter here. We could turn the density down quite a bit. I don't know, we'll go way crazy, but like, there you go. You can see you're getting these nice kind of randomly generated guides. The relax iterations are quite a bit less than it would be on the scatter. I think the scatter's 10. So by default, this is at 3 so that it's not so kind of homogeneous, kind of flat, kind of perfectly spaced. So you get a little bit more interest there. I'm just going to set this back to the sphere so we get something maybe a little more interesting. And let's do this a little higher. Set it to 100 for right now. We don't want the length to be quite that long. Let's see. Just view this. Cool. All right. Maybe we'll do a little longer. Maybe 0.3. Yeah, let's do like 0.35. That could be interesting. And we'll up this a little bit. Maybe we'll do 250 for right now. Something not too crazy, but a decent number of guides, right? So, okay, we've got our guides here. And we could certainly have this transforming geometry be put into here. It should more or less work. But let's say we wanted to have this be a little bit more robust and maybe less calculations, right? Because what we're going to do here is we're going to chain a few of these together. And so if we did something like a guide process, maybe to make it more frizzy here, for example, and we can put the skin input there, something like this, right? Well, now it's going to have to calculate that constantly, right? And it's going to be running these both in real time, or running these both time-based. And so right now it's working fine. Like, we're not running into any real problems. However, you could see that if we maybe went up to like 1,000 on this, we might start, hitting some redraw limits and things like that. Maybe it'll start being less than real time. We can turn the frequency down on this here, right? So we can make that a little more interesting. The amplitude could maybe come down a little bit. We could maybe do a little random of each of these here, something like that. Cool. All right, so we got some frizziness in there. Great. And we're going to keep stacking these on top of each other. So instead of doing that, we could just not have it have to calculate that at all, which now it's going to be able to do this pretty much unconstrained to time, which you don't need to worry about because it's static. Let me actually just turn this off for a second and see where we get to. So, okay, we're at like 28 frames per second. So you can imagine that as you keep going through more and more of these, you're going to get less and less performance. So let's set this back like this. We don't have to worry about time at all now. Although, why is that calculating time? I don't understand that, but okay. Did a time flag get set in here somewhere and freaked itself out? It shouldn't be getting time. Sorry. Yeah, there we go. Just a flag got set, I think. All right, so let's do frizz. There we go. So what we can do is we can do a whole bunch of different guide processes on this, right? So we could do frizz. We could maybe do maybe a bend first. Maybe add a little bit of curve to this hair. Let me turn this down because it's a little hard to see. Something like that. We can always turn it back up. But let me also let me try this. Let me try changing my background to gray. That might help a little bit. We might be able to see this a little bit better. Have a little more contrast. So what we can do here is we can change some of these bend attributes. We can add some angle there, add a little bit of randomness to it, things like that. We can also do guide process, we can set the length as well. So let's drop that on here as well. And we can do some randomize lengths here. So we could do some that were a little longer, some that are a little shorter, something like that. All right, so we can set some random lengths to it. We can do these random bends. We can do a guide process. Let's grab the frizz maybe. Oh yeah, that's right. Actually, I think you want to connect that all down there, because what this is doing is creating a VDB internally as well. So let me just see here if that is actually happening. Not 100% sure on that one. No, doesn't look like it. So it looks like you would have to create a skin VDB, which is interesting. Curious. I mean, I'm sure we could do that, but it seems to be working just fine right now. So, all right, so let's do some frizz here. We'll turn the frequency down on that a little bit. And maybe just give it a little randomness to the frequency and maybe a little random amplitude there, something like that, just to make it a little more interesting. So we've got some crazy hair there going. And the other really cool thing you can do here is you can do guide groom. So you could use this guide groom tool. Grab these three. And we could turn this to brush, right? So what we could do is we can hit enter to go into our kind of our activation state here. We can make our brush a little smaller. Open up our brush options if we want to here. And we could actually just brush this around, right? And make some interesting, maybe clumpiness, or I don't know. We can just kind of play around with this little, something like that, right? I don't know what this is going to be. It's going to be a weird little thing. I don't know. It's a little spiky haired mohawk thing. I don't know. Whatever. So you could do that. You can also do things like turn up the bend on it, and that'll make sure that it'll actually try to bend it, I believe, instead of just like pushing it in that direction. So if you do that, you should get more of the bend kind of inheriting there. So anyways, some interesting stuff that you could set up there. So, okay. So let's say you're all good with your groom and you've got everything happy and doing what you want it to, right? How do we now deform this, right? Because let's take a look at what this is actually going to do if we did put our animated geometry through this. Oh, looks like we're not even getting it animated, which is interesting. So we've got a problem here. So it's animated to that point, but up to here it's not. And I don't even see a way to say, hey, it's animated. So let's actually make this work. So there we go. All right, so we've got our static stuff back. Unfortunately, it's actually time dependent now, which I don't understand why that's the case. That is really frustrating. Anyways, so if we actually wanted to do this properly, we could, oh, you know what I'll do? I'll just do a retime. See if that'll do it. See if that'll kick it off. No, sorry. Time shift is what I wanted. Let's see if I can do this. I'll just hold first frame. Yeah, there we go. That kicked it off. See if I can do that up here too. Yep, there we go. Cool. Oh, cool. I don't understand. I'm moving too quick apparently. My fun. I'm not happy of how much that's happened recently. Sorry about that. Let's just get rid of that. Sorry about that, guys. So let me load this back up and we'll get back into things here. All right. Yes, please. All right, there we go. Let's get rid of this time shift. And I'm just going to save this as that. Cool. Cool. All right. So let's say we've got these guide processes here set up. and we want to transform it, right? So let's do this. We'll do guide. What is it called? Guide deform. That's what it is. So we're going to take the geometry to be deformed. We're going to take the skin and the animated skin, I guess. Actually, no, sorry. Boop. That is not correct. So we want to take the rest skin, which is this. We're going to take the animated skin, which is this. And now this is going to be time dependent. So we've got this whole process going on here. We've got our guide deform here. And now that's going to play back nice and fast. We're getting 80 some frames per second. Wait until you clump stuff. It'll all start changing in real time. Yeah. That's awesome. So here now we've got this kind of crazy spiky ball of hair that is now actually translating in very close to what would be real time, right? Or is more than what real time would be considered. So we've got our guide deform now. So that's all great. And what we can do now is we can do our hair, Vellum configure hair. Let's grab that. We're also going to need to do our group. Group expression. We'll use that again. So we'll use this here and we'll do the same thing where it's the first point of the primitive and we'll put it into point mode. So this will work even on a bunch of, hair or whatever. In this case, we can see how many points we've got on each of them. I think it's set here. We've got 8 segments. So you can always change that, right? You can make it more or less dense. These again are the guide curves, so it's going to be a little different. So there's our hair. We've got our roots that we're going to constrain. So let's call this roots again. And we'll go into our Vellum hair here. We'll just say initialize hair. Let me get in a little closer so you can see what I'm doing here. All right, so we've got our hair and we'll do a Vellum solver. Cool. And that should all be good. So let's take a look at what happens here. Oh, I forgot one thing. We didn't do the pins. We're going to pin the roots. We're going to match the animation. Yeah, that should all be good. We're just going to leave the roots as they are. All right, so let's take a look what happens here. All right, looking good. Actually, one thing I want to do is I just want to take out the second one here. I think if we only export this one, let me just see here what's going on. Yep. I just wanted to see how this was looking. Make sure we're not getting any weirdness. So interestingly, I was getting a really weird kind of bouncing before with my simulation. Not sure why that was. But what I did was I turned off this compute missing orientation and it seemed to make it a more stable simulation. There's almost like a pulsing going on through my sim, which was really weird. And I wasn't expecting it. I was expecting it to do this, which it's doing kind of again. I was using my other computer, so I don't know if it was something just weird I had going on there. Let me turn the bend stiffness up a little bit so we can check that out and make sure it's working. Yeah, there we go. Maybe we'll do something like 0.5 on that. And let me just double check that this compute missing orientation is not doing that weird little bouncy thing. I'll just let it sim once and then. No, I don't see it doing anything too weird. Interesting. Very odd. It was, yeah, it was definitely giving me some really weird results. And I'm not sure what that was all about. Cool. So that is working pretty well. And what we can do then, obviously, is take these different, groom setups or whatever. So say we wanted to, make this a bit more like it's all spiky up at the top, or I don't know what this is. I have no idea. Just a weird thing. But say we wanted it to look more like that, right? And then sim it again. It's all going to be more or less constrained in place. And we can then change the stiffness here, right? So we can up the stiffness a little bit if we want it to feel almost like it has more, hairspray in it or something like that, right? So this obviously is a much more stiff option for what's going on there. If we wanted to, we could obviously change this quite a bit, and we could have something like really long hair or whatever, whatever it might be. You can obviously do a whole bunch of different options there. And with these grooms, there's a ton of different stuff that can be done here. I'm not even sure what half of these things do. Some of the really cool things are like you can do, so if you do, I'll take this guide groom out of here. And let's just do like a guide process. We'll just do a guide process here. And what we can do here is we can do... Oh, sorry. Wrong one. Do a hair clump. Could do that. And now this is going to take it and kind of make these weird little clumps out of it. You can do all sorts of different stuff here, like changing the clump size right there, right? So you can kind of change how big the clumps are. I think you can also blend them in and out of those clumps, where what the crossover rates are and random seeds and things like that. Let's see here. Yeah, so you can play around with all sorts of different things here. If you want some stray hairs from it, different fall off, how tight it's going to be to it, all sorts of different things here. So kind of interesting. You can make clumps for your hair, and then you can obviously stick this in and simulate it, right? And it's going to be this kind of spiky, weird little thing, right? So that's whatever. It's interesting. Let me see. I think there's a guide process lift as well. So I think you can actually, you want that to be, oh, interesting. I was thinking that was going to like raise it up or like set it directionally up, but that's okay. All right, so you've got this whole simulation done, right? And these are just guide curves, right? You're not going to want to use these for your final, right? So how do we go about doing that? Well, we can do another hair gen, right? Down here. And we're also going to do an attribute delete. So let's clean off some of the attributes. We'll play around with that in a second. But let's maybe just keep some of the important ones. I'm not sure what this is even going to take in for attributes. All right, so let's do a delete non-selected. Obviously position. We could keep velocity. We could keep the width, right? We're going to want to keep that if we set that. Something like P scale you might want to keep. Yeah, it's probably fine. Let me just see if there's anything else here that we want. Just keep some of these things here. Don't think we'll need skin prim or anything like that. And shouldn't need those either. All right, cool. So let's now take this and we can actually do the same thing and grab our same two geometries here. Bring them down. What's angry at me here? That's weird. Don't know why it's giving me a topology mismatch. There shouldn't be. That's weird. I don't know why I did that. Huh. Oh, I put them in the wrong order. That's what I did wrong. I was like, what am I doing? I just wasn't paying close enough attention. Put them in the wrong order. There we go. All right, so this should be our rest skin here. This should be our guides there. Okay. Oh, man, I'm losing it. Losing my mind. Okay, so we need a rest and a rest root. And we need the skin prim. All right, so we're going to do that. Skin prim UVs, rest root, and we'll do our, should have a rest here, maybe? No? Can grab the ID, I guess, as well. I don't see a rest there, but that's okay. Now it looks like it's actually doing its thing, right? So we're getting these hairs done from the guy, and we can obviously turn this way up. We can also adjust the influence radius here. So depending on how tightly the influence is, we'll have different kind of, we'll have different amount of it reading from each of those curves, basically. You can set the influence decay here so that it's going to maybe blend a bit more. You could have it use a bunch more of them. You could have it, cross over between the clumps a bit. All sorts of different things here. So these will set a bunch of different attributes here. And yeah, so there you have something like that. And again, I am not a master groomer, whatever you want to say. So I do not want to say that this is anything fancy, but you can see here, I'm just going to set this back to kind of defaults. We can see that we're getting some kind of crazy clumps there, right? Yeah, it's a great question, KG. So KG's asking if there's a hit to performance if you don't delete the unused attributes, or is it more of a best practice? So it really depends. I have seen there's certainly cases where you're going to have a hit in performance, right? So think about it this way, right? So you've got your attributes, right? And let's just look at what we have here. So we've got 35 point attributes. We've got 7 prim, 7 detail, and some groups. Now down here we have 4, 6, and 2. So one of the main things that's going to happen there is you're going to have less like memory overhead, things like that, right? But for something this small, it's not really going to be an issue. Obviously, if you're dealing with gigantic simulations, you're going to run it. You could run into some real problems there. Maybe flip is something that's pretty, that's a pretty easy one to think about. Some of the crazy amounts of data. Pyro's a little different because that's all volumetric, but certainly you could run into some real performance issues when you're trying to update all of those values constantly. I think the biggest reason to do that is for saving it to disk. So when you save these things out to disk, you're going to get a huge file savings, right? From just saving that sim, one way versus, with less attributes on it, right? So if I do, let's just do a file cache here, and we can just kind of play around with this, right? So let's do this. We'll say, here, guide sim. And let's just do version 1. Great. We'll save it to disk. Let it run through its thing. Let's take a look at this then. So let me open this up. We'll look at here. Okay. So let's take a look at how big V1 is. We don't need to look at them all. So let's just look at this. Properties. So that's about 20 megabytes right there, right? And if we go to version 2 and turn this guy off and now do the exact same thing and run this again. Actually, it probably saved that almost instantly because it was already cached. But let's take a look at what's actually going on here. Properties. And yeah, so now we have 114 megabytes, right? So we were looking at, that's over 10 times the amount of data that we've saved, right? And this is a really tiny little simulation, right? So like if we were to do something way more intense, like say we went to like, I mean, let's just go up to 1,000. I mean, this can obviously handle it, right? So let's just go to 1,000. There's our crazy clumpy hair. Just gonna do something like that. Cool. All right, so let's do this now. So let's do version 3 that way. So we'll save that to disk. That'll sim all of our stuff here. It's actually kind of crazy how fast these sim. Sometimes actually you get a decent little hit with just the viewport playback. Sometimes it can almost sim faster than if you don't have the viewport going. All right, so here is our playback right there. Cool, right? Yeah, super exciting. And then if we do 4, save that. That should save pretty quick. Yep, a little more data to save. Let's take a look at that now. Oh, of course I closed it. So if we look at that now, so V3, oh, you know what? I didn't turn this back on for 4. So let's do that. So now, if we look at this, we should have, yep. So it's 77 megabytes for it with the files or with the attributes removed, and 455 with them on there. So they certainly are going to reduce quite a bit when you have, just double checking these. Yep. Oh, that's weird. Why'd that get so much bigger? Oh, it didn't. I don't know what's happening. My computer's not reading these properly. I don't know. Going too fast for it. Okay. Yep. So definitely a lot of file savings there. So it's really kind of a combination of saving, some memory, when you're working. Obviously, in this case, we have, now we have quite a few more, hair guides or whatever. So we can certainly up this quite a bit to maybe 10,000 now, something like that. Yeah. So now we've got these kind of crazy clumps with a bunch of hairs in them, things like that. Obviously these get really dense at this point. So there's a lot of, savings that can be had when you do those things. Probably your best bet if you were going to be rendering something like this anyways would be to take this into Karma and do something maybe with the new hair procedural in there. Yeah, it's interesting, KG. I mean, optimization isn't something you think of right off the bat, but especially with simulation, there's just so many attributes that come out of here, right? I mean, there's 35 point attributes, and you really don't need them, right? I'm not sure if there's a Vellum. I'm not sure if this post process does that to output attributes. Yeah, let me see. Actually, this might. Let me just check here. Nope. So you can actually output more with this. That's interesting. So you could actually output these different stresses and distances and things like that with the Vellum post process. But yeah, you can't actually reduce that. Let me just see one more thing here. I think there's one more. Vellum. Vellum IO. Just want to see if that. Yes. So this one actually should. Let me just see here. Vellum IO. This should actually remove some of those attributes. So let's see what this actually is doing. Okay. So this hasn't gone quite to the extent of what I did before there. But it is deleting quite a few attributes. Now, the thing about Vellum IO that's a little different is that this will actually save your constraints as well. And your collisions? Yeah, your collision geometry. I don't know. That's weird. I don't know if it actually saves that or not. But this will actually save both your geometry and your constraints in two different files and read them back in for you. So if you needed that for some reason, that would be good to do. And you can see here there's a save filter, and it'll delete certain attributes on there for you as well. So that's kind of nice. And you can save it here to be geometry or pack geometry and constraints. So, but yeah, optimization is huge. It really, especially when you start working with larger data sets, like it's just so helpful to really optimize stuff. And even just a simple attribute delete is enough to kind of get you something that's a bit more useful, for you. And so here you go. We've got our, ball of hair now doing its thing. Let me see if I turn this down just a little bit. I mean, you can see we get quite a few hairs out of this. And so let's see here. If we have the density set to 20,000, what does that do? So it looks like we've got 61,000 hairs in this case. And let's see what a playback is like. Yeah, it's still fairly quick. So, I mean, you can get a lot of performance out of this, do a lot of interesting stuff with the hair constraints. So, obviously you could do this with just about anything, right? You could take a sphere and put it through its own simulation, right? So you could actually stack these things on top of each other. So instead of doing this, what if we did something a little more interesting? Let's do Vellum. Let's do a Vellum tetrahedral soft body, because that I think is the most interesting of them. Yeah, I'm just going to cut these guys. And we'll get rid of this because that's not going to be that interesting. There we go. There we go. All right, so let's do what they suggested last time. Nope, just remesh. Polyreduce, remesh. That's going to go into our tet conform. All right. So let's get a little bit higher polygon count here. Let's do something like that. And then we'll do something like that. Remesh it. Tet conform. Maybe we'll do this a little tinier. Maybe we'll do 1.5. Nope, want it a little tighter. Cool. Should be fine. Let's do a Vellum solver. I always want to type Vellum sim for some reason. It's not. It's Vellum solver. Let's move this sphere up. Like so. And then we can put a ground plane in here and just see what happens. Let's give it a little, maybe a little initial velocity. I think if we put a point velocity here, just give it a little set to value. No. I'll just say keep incoming and add a velocity. We'll just give it 1 in the X. Oh, okay. Interesting. Any any advice on using vellum hair with cloth, like a fur character with a shirt? Now I haven't done a ton of like really advanced, like not advanced, but like really, you know, I haven't really done any character effect stuff like that, to be honest. I think your best bet would be to, yeah, I mean, you'd have to have the groom start in a way that would be able to handle the cloth sitting on top of it, right? So that would be kind of the first thing that would have to happen there, right? So I would almost guess that you would have your, like you would have a couple rest frames to begin with, like a couple pre-roll frames to let the hair and the cloth kind of all settle into place where they should be. So there's no like intersections and stuff like that, and then allow, your sim to kind of run with your animation and stuff like that. I haven't personally done that very much. That would probably be something better for me to talk to one of my coworkers, Michael, about. He would probably have he would definitely have some really good insight into that. So I wouldn't say that that's particularly my forte, but let me talk to Michael about that. That might be an interesting thing to have a conversation about at some point here. So let me actually make a note of that. It's kind of interesting. But yeah, Ruben, that's an interesting question. Certainly not my area of expertise by a long shot, but I think it has to do a lot with being able to pre-roll. Kind of, I've seen it before where they kind of start with the fur, give it maybe like a couple frames to chill and get into its like kind of a kind of stable pose, and then have maybe the cloth kind of not attached to it, but kind of like, yeah, kind of almost like stitch into place. You know what I mean? So I think that would be what I would at least think of as like a starting point. All right. So back to this. We've got our sphere here. And what we can do is we can, let's do a point deform. And we'll say we're going to deform this. The rest point lattice is here. Deforming is there. Cool. Looking good. All right. So we've got, this is our deforming geo. So what we're going to do is we're make a couple nulls here. So let's say rest geo, just so we can keep track of where these things are going. So there's our rest geo up here. So we'll just connect these guys. Oops. Hello. Connect. There we go. All right. So we need this to be our rest skin here. This is not correct. We want to cut that. And this is going to be our animated. All right. So we've got our hair generation on this. This should be all clumpy and weird now. And so now this should deform those guides. Pretty funky. And it's not right, obviously, because it's not simulated. But it is deforming it kind of the way we want it to, right? So it's kind of interesting. So what we'll do now is we'll stick in these roots. That should all work. We'll initialize the hair attributes that we had before. That should work. And let's see what our Vellum solver does here. Yeah, we'll leave that at 500, I guess. Oh, you know what? I don't think I had a ground there. That's part of the problem. I'm like, why is that not deforming? That should deform more. All right, let's do that. Plunk. And there we go. Got a weird little sphere that's got some hair on it that's kind of rolling around. And there we go. Getting something kind of interesting there from a soft body simulation that gets, done up here. And then port that into this simulation down here, and we kind of have it all flowing together. And if you remember when we were talking probably a month or so ago, maybe a little more than a month ago, to Mark, he kind of talked about the same thing. It was a little different. He was doing it in maybe RBD and different things like that. But the idea of kind of doing one simulation, kind of taking the results of that, bringing it into another, it works really great with Vellum, right? Because you're going to always be outputting, geometry. And since Vellum just operates on geometry, you can just get more and more and just kind of keep, moving it through that same kind of workflow, right? And again, if we wanted to take this and make it a little bit, a little more floppy or whatever, we could really go crazy with it. Maybe make it a quarter of what it was. And we should see quite a bit more bend and deflection and things like that to it. And there we go. It's definitely quite a bit looser. And you should see too, when it kind of falls down here, it's being affected by the normal force of the wind against it, against that kind of static airfield, right? That it's, or just from it being pulled down, I guess it's lighter. So it's tending to stay upright a little bit more. So yeah, just a really interesting way that you can kind of take things and kind of connect them together and, make all these different kind of things stacked on top of each other. And you could imagine, obviously, this would be a similar thing. Maybe if you were doing character stuff, obviously you'd have a full character and you'd groom them and put hair in certain, sections and areas and things like that. In fact, you can use instead of the hair gen here, you could use, I think it's actually guide groom, if I'm not mistaken. Let me just check here. And if we took the skin in, you could take the sphere here. And if we did a brush, I think this would work. Let me just double check. I think this is how this works. No, not a brush. Plant? Is that right? Yeah, I think it's plant. There we go. So we could do something like this, and we'd have to change a bunch of things like the default length, right? So you'd want to clear that. So maybe we do something like this. We could draw in these guides. So maybe the hair's just on the top part of it here. So you could kind of draw these in like so. You could imagine this obviously being some sort of character or whatever it might be. So we put some guides on the top there, and then the guides and the skin should come out there. And there we go. We got our kind of clumpiness there, and we could come back here and again draw some of these in. And this is all working pretty quick. You could do a lot of stuff pretty fast here with this. And if you are interested in this kind of stuff and you haven't seen Kai's talk from FMX, go check that out, because there's some fun stuff coming. And he'll show, don't have the, this is not the animated geo. So let's look down here, right? Yep. So if we take this, there we go. We'll come down and bloop. And there we go. So it's as simple as that, really. I mean, you can take these simulations and do a whole lot of stuff with them, right? You could certainly put these together in the same simulation. There's no reason you couldn't do that. However, I think, honestly, you're going to just end up getting a much more controllable simulation doing it kind of one step after another. So, yeah, let's do the last little step here. So this is our rest geometry here. And make another null. And MGO. And let's just take those and put them where they should be, down at the bottom here. It's a little messy, but anyways. All right, so this would be our rest. And then our animation. So if we look at this here. There we go. Yeah, it's a great question. Yeah, Zach, it could do that. I think, yeah, it basically what you would get, the only real difference you'd get between the two would be if they were both in the same simulation. You would have the thickness of the hair affecting the keep it in this situation. It would keep it off the ground by that thickness, right? So it would try to keep that constraint true, where it would just push it up a little bit. What you're talking about with the stiff bristles keeping something off the ground, I think could be pretty tricky to get to work. I think you could certainly. Yeah, I mean, we can try that. Let me just see what this looks like here real quick, and then we'll give that a shot, because that's interesting. Could be an interesting thing to do. We got a little time here. So there it is with all the whatever guides and things like that. I mean, obviously this is a low number of guides for the original, so it's not particularly a good. Have time to go over intersection fixes using Vellum. I don't know if I'd have a good if you had a good example of where you've seen that before, or something that that might have that Enkeet. I think that's how you might say it. Yeah, I think with Zach, you're saying, trying to get your head around it. Yeah, basically the idea is that you would get a little bit more of that two-way coupling kind of between the objects, but add a much harder thing to set up, right? Yeah, and Keith, if you have any specific examples of intersection fixes, I don't really have a way to just say oh, this is not working. I don't know if I have a good starting condition to show that with. I think an important thing with intersections is yeah, you do see that from time to time where geometry might get stuck to each other and things like that. I think the best thing to remember with that is that a lot of times adding a little bit more substeps, maybe a little bit more constraint iterations, can really help that quite a bit. Because intersections usually happen when things move too quickly from one step to another, between frames and stuff. So, if you have a sphere here and you've got a point that's trying to, move and collide with it, right? And not interpenetrate it. If one frame it's evaluating here and the next frame it's evaluating on the other side of it, or it's gone past the thickness of this shell or whatever, it could just jump right across that almost and then get stuck on the inside and not be able to let itself out. So sometimes adding in substeps can be a really good way to fix intersections, especially with faster moving collisions and things like that. So that is one thing for sure. Yeah, so two clumps of hair colliding with each other, right? Yeah, I think one really, really nice thing, if you do have some weirdness there, is that Vellum post-process, right? So if we drop this down here, I don't know if you'll see it at all. I don't know if there's I don't know what's maybe happening here in this, but if you do run into something like this, let's see. I don't see anything moving in this. Let me see. Oh, right. I don't have detangle turned on. So yeah, there we go. There are a few pieces here that are detangling, right? So if you do something like this with the detangle, oh geez, that just dropped right out of my frame or something. You might see it a little bit here if it goes like over onto itself here. You might see some weirdness, maybe. But I don't really see too much there. Yeah, the detangle can really help with fixing some little things here too. So like there, yeah, that's actually trying to help make sure that you're not having intersections and stuff like that. So that can be helpful. Oh, there you go. You get a little thickness there. So that's going to try to kind of fix that. And obviously you could do more passes of that and get better and better results. Let's see if that'll show. See what that looks like. Yeah, that's not really like temporally stable though. So honestly, what I'll do a lot of times is just try to figure out what a good like sub-step iteration is for working with this stuff. And if things are moving really quickly, I probably know that I'm going to need a little bit more sub steps to be able to resolve those collisions and things happening. So hopefully that can give you a little bit of an answer in the right direction. But certainly if you run into something, you can always post it onto the Discord server, and we can, people can chat about it and things like that. There's a link in chat there if you want to join in there. If you're running into any of those kind of problems, happy to take a look at what's going on and maybe help troubleshoot something specifically. But as far as just like a general rule of thumb, I don't really know if I have a good one to kind of start out with. I do actually want to try to play around with what Zach mentioned, though, with having the hair and this simulation together. Yeah, let's try it. So what I could do here is, all right, let's give this a shot. I'm going to, all right, I don't want to take too much of the stuff that I've already done here. Let's get rid of this one. This one that's just like partially. Yeah, yep, I know. Thank you. It's angry at me because I don't have anything real in there. All right, so let's, oh, I'm on frame 65. That's also why it's angry at me. Okay, so we have our hair here. So we don't need this guide deform for this. So let's do this. Let's take this and we'll just say do a combined sim. Okay, so we shouldn't need this. This will work here. There's our hair gen. I'm just going to try to organize this a little bit real quick. All right, so there we go. Don't need those. I'm going to use the, we'll leave that Vellum solver. We have our tetrahedral. And we might need this eventually, but I'm going to cut those. Okay, so we've got our hair here. We've got our tetrahedral here. So let's, we'll say initialize tet. And this is initialize hair. So those should each have those tags on them, which is good. So let's do a Vellum pack. So this is a way you could take two distinct streams of Vellum geometry and combine them. I haven't done it in a while, so hopefully I'm going to remember how to do this properly. But so there's our Vellum pack for each of them. We'll shift click those, alt click to merge them, to make a merge node. And then we can do a Vellum unpack here. And let's just make sure that that's looking good. Got our tetrahedrons. Okay. I don't think we need to worry about any of those unique names. I think we don't have like duplicates, so that should be okay. Let me just make sure we don't have duplicate. We actually might have duplicate IDs. Well, let's just do that. We'll enforce unique name attributes. Should be good. Okay, let's try this, see what happens. Let me just grab this solver. Don't know if this will work or not, but let's try it. I mean, obviously they're not connected together. Okay, that's interesting. Curious why that's not working. Let's see here. Well, let me just do this. Okay, let me try one more thing here. So instead of doing the packed thing, for some reason that's not working. Let me just take these and we'll put these in line with each other here. And what we can do is merge. We're going to group these. So let's just group these by primitives. We'll call this hair. Call this soft body. We'll merge these guys together. Oops. That's not what I meant to do. Let's merge these together. And we'll initialize the hair with, the hair group. So now we've got our hair initialized, and then we'll initialize the soft body group. And that should be good. Okay, getting somewhere. Interesting. Let's try this instead. Oh, let me try that. Just turn that off, see if that does anything better. Nope. Okay. Instead of the tetrahedral soft body, let's do just a regular one. Let's just try the strut soft body instead. All right, so the cloth will be on the soft body, and the struts will also be on the soft body. Let's see if that works. I must be missing something here somewhere. Oh. Well, there we go. That was what I was doing. Forgot to turn that off. All right, we're going to go back a little here. I see what I was doing. So I didn't have I had this match animation and the pinpoints on, and that was pinning it all in place. So now we've got it working a little bit better there. And so that's good. So let's do there's our hair in that. Let's do a constraints. That's what I get for reusing stuff. And so what we should do here is do a pin to target, I believe. Nope. Attach to geometry. I think that's what we want. I always get those two mixed up. So let's do points, roots. And then target group. That should be soft body, I believe. Nope, that's not going to work because that is still not the right one, I don't think. Yep, okay. There we go. That's what it is, stitch points. So we are going to use, we're going to use that. We're going to use the roots. It's going to constrain to the closest point on the primitive. And now that should stick. Cool. It didn't. Why did it not stick? Sorry. Let's try that. Sorry. I always get this. All right, let me see if this does it. If we glue it. Does that work? Nope. Might be because it's the tetrahedral. Anyways, that is not working properly for me. So sorry about that. Let me see if I can do one more thing here. Soft body. We'll get rid of this. Stitch points. This is what I get for going off script. I'm like, trying to figure this out in real time. All right. That should be right. That should be right. That looks right. Who knows how soft this thing's going to be? There we go. It was the tetrahedral. That was the problem. So now we've got those. That's working interestingly. Let's see here. What if we do... Just curious if we do this. No, that won't work. Attach to geometry. Will that work? Because that one wasn't actually... following the way I wanted it to. Because what it was doing there is it's doing the same thing it was before without the orientation being set. So it's actually not constraining the orientation. You can see how this is laying down across the top of it here. So that's not constraining the orientation the way I wanted it to. However... Let's just see what that does. Add a couple constraints there with the glue. Let's see. See if what that does. All right. Well, I'm going to call that a failure, unfortunately, but we gave it a shot. Not everything's always going to work out. But hopefully, for the rest of the hair stuff, hopefully that gave you a much better sense of how you can use these hair simulations and, you know, kind of blend things together and create some interesting effects with hairs and, you know, grooming and different things like that. So I think that's where we'll end it for the evening. But if you guys have any questions before I head out, I'd be happy to try to answer them as best I can. Also, just keep in just a note that I will be away in Europe for the next couple of weeks. I'll be at the Annecy Festival, and then there will be a there is a London Solaris boot camp that's workshop thing that's being run. I can kind of pull that up real quick and show you. That is right here. I have this workshop here, and there's going to be two different things. One is going to be for people that are new to using Solaris. Moeen Saeed is going to be doing that. I don't know how to say his brother's name, so I'm not going to try. But if you are interested in something that's a little bit more in-depth for an existing Houdini artist that's looking for more USD workflows, I'll be doing a 2-day workshop there. Yeah, so if you guys are in the London area, there will be a live workshop there that you could always be a part of. It's June 19th and 20th, 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. So, yeah, it should be pretty cool. If you can swing the time, that would be awesome. Love to see some of you there. And if not, all good. Thanks so much. Yeah, KG. Yeah, it should be good. Annecy and London. So it should be a busy and tiring trip, but hopefully very rewarding. So I'm looking forward to it. But yeah, so that's, I think, where we will end things for the evening. Thank you all for being a part of this. Yeah, Zach, I'm glad to explore some things for you we'll go off script and explore some things. So I'll be back in a couple of weeks. Check out the website for the schedule if you're interested. We'll be continuing. I believe I had a couple more things I wanted to wrap up with Vellum. There's so many things about it. Wanted to play a little bit with fluids and talk about how that works, and then talk about how the actual like rigid bodies that are now in there work. So I'll probably be playing around with that a little bit while I'm traveling, just for fun, just to keep myself entertained while in some of my downtime. But other than that, I appreciate everybody joining tonight. And yeah, I hope to see you guys in a couple weeks when I'm back streaming. But for tonight, that'll be it. So thank you all. And I'll see you guys next time. Bye.